What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I am back with a collection update here, and this will cover the whole Maryland Deathfest haul. I had an absolute blast at MDF. I got a lot of killer stuff, maybe like a little bit less than I usually got. It wasn't like the ridiculous t-shirt haul that I had in 2022, but I still got a bunch of stuff. I'm even sporting a new shirt. This was an absolutely killer find, and I got to buy it from Luke LeMay himself, which I think is pretty damn cool. But while I was there, I also hit up some of the vendors in the Mall of Metal, or whatever you want to call it, and I even hit up a record store the first day, namely Soundgarden, because that place is absolutely awesome. And even while I was at the fest, I was even given some stuff by some fans for me to go over in here, which I'm truly appreciative of, and that's absolutely awesome that you guys would do that. One of the bands that gave me their release actually played the fest, but I didn't get a chance to see them because they were at Angel's Rock Bar, and they were probably playing during another band that I absolutely need to see. But either way, it was just awesome to run into a lot of killer fans and, just check out the fest, because the fest was absolutely amazing. Anyway, let's get down to this because there's a lot of killer underground stuff in here. Argentum Ad Terum Funebrarum. This is the first full length from this Mexican blackened doom metal act. This is actually a 2016 reissue. I picked this one up in the Mall of Metal from a particular vendor that seemed to specialize in Mexican releases. So yeah, these next two after here are also from that same vendor. And admittedly, I really haven't dove that much into Mexico's metal scene, so this was kind of cool to find a guy that specialized in stuff from Mexico. And this was a really interesting release. This is very gothic, very dark and sinister. I do think there's a little bit of classic Death Doom, namely Peaceful Death Doom. I definitely got some huge vibes for, My Dying Bride, early Paradise Lost. Now, this originally came out in 1996, and I will admit the production here is a little bit on the muddy side. The guitars sound very swampy. There's very gothic synths everywhere and very cavernous vocals. And the range of these vocals are kind of interesting. They go from low, gravelly, again, very cavernous, Death Doom style, Incantation. And then occasionally you get these very high, almost pterodactyl screams that come out. But there's a lot of cool early mellow death on there. There's a lot of guitar harmonies and lead harmonies on top of the riffs. And there's some flat out killer riffs on here Horta, Funebra, Ad Posthumum? Not human, Humum. Again, very dark, very sinister, very gothic, and that mood is pretty much just all over this release. Again, with the muddier production, I feel some of it is lost, and this is a 2016 reissue, so I don't know if they did any remastering or just reissued it. But I think with a remastered job, a lot of these songs would, really jump out, because it's namely the rhythm guitars that feel a little too muddy. And I think with a remaster job, I think this would sound fantastic, because it's namely the rhythm guitars that feel just a little too muddy, you kind of lose a lot of the intricacies in the riffs. But there's also the keys. While, a good chunk of them I like, they do contribute to that very gothic atmosphere. Some of the tracks on here, actually, two of the ones that I named here, Horta, Funebra, and Ad Posthumum. I keep trying to uncorrect myself and say posthuman. The keys just sound, I don't know, off. They sound a little too cheesy. I get this was 1996, but Ad Posthumum, the keys feel very Christmassy, and that's not necessarily the vibe I was looking for. It'd be a Tim Burton kind of Christmas, but still it didn't necessarily work for me. And the keys on Pax Moriendi kind of sound like they were plucked out of a Castlevania game on Super NES. Doesn't really sound that good. Now, towards the end of this album, there's definitely a little bit more death metal that comes up on Astrum, Argentum, and Mortuus Infradamini. Man, a lot of this is in Latin, or it could be Spanish. I think it's Latin. Either way, I'm not great at saying the track names, but the songs feel a little bit more intense. Again, a little bit of that more blackened death metal sound comes out. It gets a little bit faster and more urgent. And honestly, I could have used maybe a little bit more of that at the beginning, because this album is kind of long. It is 77 minutes long, and you kind of start feeling the length after a while. But overall, I dig the sound. I just think there might be too much of it. And again, the production being as muddy as it is, especially in the rhythm guitars, kind of hampers it. But honestly, if you dig bands like My Dying Bride, early Paradise Lost, maybe even a little bit of early Cradle of Filth too, check this out. Pretty solid listen. Shub Niggurath. Evilness and Darkness Prevails. Now, originally I thought this was a reissue of this Mexican death metal / blackened death metal acts 1994 EP, but when I looked at it, I noticed that this was a compilation that included that EP as well as 2 previous EPs, Unknown Adore and Blasphemies of the Netherworld. So I figured, hey, this is a lot of stuff that I've been looking for, because I have heard a ton of people talk about how this is like, you know, the Mexican equivalent to Morbid Angel, or at least their earlier career. I think they changed their sound a little bit later. Now, this is a 2021 remaster of at least the Evilness and Darkness EP, and the remaster was done by Dan Lowndes of Cruciamentum, who I'm a big fan of his production, and I'm a huge fan of Cruciamentum. So all these things made this like kind of an instant buy when I saw it in the bin, and this is pretty damn fantastic. This definitely sounds like Morbid Angel. In fact, the vocals on here, it kind of sounds like David Vincent. There's a little bit of immolation kind of worked in there in terms of like some of the more intricate, weird riffs on here. Like there's definitely a lot of dissonance. But when it comes down to lead work, it is very much Trey-centric leads, like lots of dive bombs, very shreddy, very thrashy, like definitely stuff you would hear on Altars of Madness for sure. The riff work is intricate, it's kind of technical, lots of off-time grooves. The songwriting itself is absolutely awesome, like lots of great transitions, lots of cool riff changes everywhere on this. As much as this definitely sounds more comparable to Morbid Angel, the drum work on here kind of reminds me of Lee Harrison with his like just constant amazing fills and technical drum work, like no shade being thrown on Pete Sandoval at all, but I don't know, like Lee Harrison's got like a lot of just awesome accents and stuff that, you know, he really puts his signature on in terms of Monstrosity's work. Now, the Unknown Adore EP is rough sounding. Like, I don't think they really treated that one very much at all. It's very grainy and dirty sounding. It's kind of hard to make out really anything. And the songs are a little bit more meat and potatoes on that. But the Blasphemies of the Netherworld EP does sound a lot better. You can start to hear like the band sound really come together. The riffs, again, get a little bit more technical. The production's notably better. And I don't know if Dan Lowndes did remasters on all of these in terms of like the, you know, other EPs. I think he might have just done the Evil and the Darkness Prevails one. But with compilations like this that kind of has like a bit of a timeline to it, it's really cool to hear like the band get better with each successive release. And I definitely need to get some more Shub Niggurath in my collection, so believe me, I'm going to be looking around and seeing what I can find, especially down in Florida, which if you're watching this right now, I am probably back from Florida, so I'm already gearing up for, you know, whatever I'm about to show you, which hopefully is a huge, bountiful collection of all sorts of killer metal, but, you know, who knows, it might be like a slow vacation. I'm really hoping not. Anyway, this is a really solid compilation. I recommend the Evilness and Darkness EP side of it, which I think I've been saying Evil and Darkness. It means the same thing. That stuff, I think, is absolutely fantastic. The strongest material on this comp, but the rest of it, it's still pretty good too. It's just, again, like a little muddy. But yeah, check this band out. I am definitely going to find more by them. Remains, Angels Burned. This is the first full length from this Mexican death metal act. I believe the vendor actually talked me into this one, you know, made some really good comparisons to Swedish death metal. And generally, you can pretty much lure me in with, you know, HM2 guitars. It's actually pretty easy. And this definitely has that Swedish HM2 sound, but there's a little bit more to it. This is almost kind of like a halfway step between Swedish death metal like from Stockholm and like melodic death metal from like Gothenburg. There's a lot of melody to the riffs, but it's played with an HM2 tone. So you get that nasty, savage buzzsaw tone, but you also get like some more melodic passages on there, like Edge of Sanity. Honestly, you know, maybe like a little bit of Dismember in there too. Dismember's definitely very melodic. They put on such an amazing set. Anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked because I could talk about that set for a while. It's not the most overdriven buzzsaw tone, but it's definitely there. It definitely kind of like chunkifies the riffs a little bit. And again, like musically latches on to a lot of bands that I'm a huge fan of. I'll even throw in like Bloodbath and Grave and Entrails in there too. Also, I gotta give this album props for opening up with an intro that's actually musical. Like I saw the word intro as the first track. It's like, all right, we'll probably skip this one. But honestly, it's musical. It's a balls out kind of groovy, riffy instrumental that leads right into the first, well, second track, I guess. Like, we're going to actually count this intro as a track. We're not going to be dismissive here. The second song, Reborn, which is this fast, thrashy ripper of a song, which this album's got a good balance of like more groove-laden tracks, kind of just to get your head bobbing, to flat out just like thrashy, aggressive songs like Archaic Demons. That song is practically just a thrash song, albeit beefed up by a buzzsaw guitar tone and like some, more death metal vocals. Like the vocals on here are actually pretty solid. Like they're really clear, they're well enunciated, they're not too deep, like they're almost kind of a universal one. Like they could kind of fit on a thrash/death thrash album. Now most of this I thought was really solid, but there were a couple of issues on here. Namely, like across the board, I feel like the drum production was really thin. Like at points, I could like kind of barely hear the snare. And the song Bringers of Death, I don't know, like there's something about that song that it just doesn't gel at all. Like it feels like it's out of sync. The riffs that kind of started off feel, I don't know, just kind of odd, like they don't really generate a very good hook. It's the only song on here where I thought it was just like, man, that one feels like it still needed a little bit of work. But overall, I feel like the rest of the album was really good. Like there's a really solid cover of Live in Hell, originally done by Edge of Sanity at the end, and they absolutely nail it. It's just solid death metal flat out. If you're a big fan of any of the number of bands that I've brought up to compare this band to, and you just like, HM2, D-beat driven, kind of groovy, old school death metal, check this out. Pretty solid listen. All right, we got a split here from Noisy Neighbors and Shitlife called Competitive Victimhood. Now, Noisy Neighbors was one of my big standouts from MDF. Like, they were possibly my favorite grindcore band that played, and honestly, all the grindcore bands that I saw that played were absolutely awesome. Necessary Death was killer, so was Hemorrhage. But this band's performance absolutely blew me away. And it was one of the few times that I was actually able to get in the merch tent when there wasn't like a super long line. And I saw that Noisy Neighbors had this split, and all I had was their full length, so I figured, hey, let's get some more stuff. Plus, they are actually releasing, or have released, their split with Necessary Death as well, which I believe is on their Bandcamp, and then CDs are eventually coming. But yeah, there's more coming out from this band and yet another band that played MDF. They tried to schedule it so it'd be out and available in physical format at the fest, but it just didn't work out that way. But anyway, back to this split. Noisy Neighbors, Austin, Texas, grindcore/death grind band. They're absolutely fantastic. They're also absolutely hilarious live too. But yeah, D beats, lots of just like savage, down-picked riffs, guttural vocals and screams. These guys almost, I would say, like carry that flag into battle that used to be hoisted up by Insect Warfare, and sadly isn't being hoisted up by that band anymore because they are defunct. But while they definitely have like a lot of like Insect Warfare's just dimed intensity, there's also a lot of like loose fun, like especially Cheap Heat. Cheap Heat's is kind of like a D-beat rager, a little bit more like crusty sounding overall. The riffy breakdown on Terror Pact is a nice break from all the blast beats on their side. It's just flat out fun. If you have not checked out Noisy Neighbors, just check out their full length. It's absolutely amazing. Now, Shitlife is a band that I've seen actually twice. They are from Detroit, Michigan, or rather they were. Apparently they broke up last year, which sucks because they were absolutely hilarious and awesome live when they played here in Toledo. God, probably 3 years ago. The band features former Black Dahlia Murder drummer Zach Gibson. He was the drummer on Miasma, and yeah, this band just writes short, fun, just kind of ridiculous songs. I mean, this is definitely a little bit more like humor-oriented grindcore. Like, I mean, the track names here: The Church of Real Grindcore, Unlimited Stupidity. Track 7, I really like this one, Rage on Behalf of the Machine. So it's very comical, snide, sarcastic, but man, this band is just flat out super explosive on every song. The drum work is absolutely insane. It's very raw and gritty. Like the guitar tone is a little bit more, I don't know, I would say kind of like squawky and just, a little bit noisier than surprisingly Noisy Neighbors. And unlike Noisy Neighbors, I don't think there's like as much like death grind to it. Like it's more just flat out grind. In fact, I think their side is even shorter than Noisy Neighbors. But yeah, this is an absolutely killer split. I want to say it's like maybe 13 minutes. I might be, tacking on minutes there just to make it sound longer. I don't know. It goes by in a flash every time I listen to it, but I keep coming back to it because it's just a flat out fun split. If you love Nauseum, Rotten Sound, Terrorizer, just, you know, solid grindcore / death grind. Check this split out. Check out both bands. I am disappointed that Shitlife is no longer around, but, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, just check out both of these bands regardless, because they're both awesome. Derketa, In Death We Meet. This is the lone full length from this Pittsburgh Death Doom act, and I had never heard of this band until I saw them live at the Ram's Head, and I had no idea like who all was in the band, and finding out that Robin Mason of Gruesome was in it was a pretty cool surprise. But going over this, finding out that the drummer on this album in particular, who sadly she left the band, was the old drummer from Mythic, which was kind of a short-lived all-female death doom act from Pittsburgh that just absolutely ruled. Pretty much at the time, all I knew was I really enjoyed their set. It was just grimy, slow, murky, cavernous death doom, and that was enough for me to go get a CD at their merch booth. And yeah, this was just a fantastic set, and this album is just gnarly. Like, take all the slow parts of Incantation and Disma and kind of just throw it on one album, and that's pretty much what this is. This album is cavernous, it drips with atmosphere and riffs. Very comparable to like early Hooded Menace as well. Carcinoid, if you guys are familiar with Carcinoid from Australia, very similar to that as well. This album is very slow, it lumbers, it lurches. The vocals, again, are just very cavernous, but they're kind of like, I don't know, like grim and throaty sounding. Very ghastly, you could say. And while this album definitely stays at a very slow pace, like songs like Obscurities of Darkness, Rest in Peace, and Last Rites, they do speed it up a little bit. There's some like more flat out death metal that shows up. Lots of droning tremolos that kind of give this a big atmospheric quality. And I really like their cover of Troops of Doom because they kind of like half time it. Actually, they might quarter time it. It's slow and murky. It kind of makes it sound even more sinister than the original version. Yeah, I dug everything on this, and sadly this is the only album by the band. Now, they are back together, obviously, because they just played Maryland Deathfest, so hopefully they're working on something new. I would love to hear something new, because this is just an absolutely awesome discovery from a band that I didn't know existed until the fest. If you're a big fan, again, of Disma, Hooded Menace, I would throw in Temple of Void too. Check this out. This is an absolutely gnarly listen. Desecrated Tombs, the Ancient Horror Arises demo. Now this one has an interesting story because this came from someone that I met on Facebook. Super nice dude. He said he was going to MDF, and he said he had a demo that he wanted to give me, and he really liked the channel, so I said, yeah man, if you see me there, definitely hit me up with it. And I ran into him like multiple times. Now his name is Brian Petricioni. I think that might be how you say his last name. I don't know. I probably splashed a little bit too much culture on that just to make up for the lack of culture in my name. But he's a multi-instrumentalist. He did, I believe, everything on this one. And I'm using a picture from the first demo up here because I couldn't find a picture for this because, I mean, yeah, there's really not much to the art on here. But when I looked up the first demo, I noticed that, one of the main reasons why it's New Jersey and Florida is, well, the Florida half of this band was one Lee Harrison on the first one, which surprisingly, he wasn't doing drums. Actually, Brian was doing drums and vocals, and Lee was doing guitar and bass, which I just think is just kind of interesting because most people think of Lee as a drummer. Now, Lee's just a flat-out badass musician. I think we can just leave it at that. But for what this lacks in artwork, this makes up for in just slow, sludgy, disgusting death doom. Honestly, I could use a lot of the same adjectives to, describe this as I did with Derketa, because I feel like they're very cut from the same cloth. Lots of incantation, Disma, Carcinoid, Hooded Menace. Slow, it's murky. It does have its moments where it does pick up the pace a little bit and get more into like a death metal groove, but for the most part, this is just cavernous, rotten, festering sounding death doom, and I really dug it. For the most part, the songs stay in that slow, lumbering pace. Occasionally they get even slower. There are moments on here that I would say are a little bit close to Funeral Doom, where they're just droning on single riffs. And again, I think Brian did everything on here, so all the guitar work is his as well. And for a demo, it sounds great. Like, the production on here, I think, is just kind of what you'd expect from just like cavernous death doom in general. The drums have a nice sound in the mix. His vocals are long, drawn-out, cavernous roars. They sound disgusting as hell, and the guitars are thick and sludgy. Enshrouded by Emptiness is probably one of my personal favorites on here. It has some of the most doomy, just gross riffs on it. But the last track on here, Upon Darkened Horizons, is really interesting because, I don't know, I feel like the riff work is very different from any of the other songs in here, where I hear like more of those like major chords, like they are like more bright melodies, except played through the most filthy, doomy filter possible. So you get this weird contrast, but it works. Like it has this kind of anchor melody that it keeps coming back to that is, again, sludgy and doomy, but bright. But then it goes into just the regular sludgy, doomy, and, you know, more disgusting sound. There's even a really cool clean break in there that is very tuneful. That song is just like very interesting in terms of the dynamics on it. Like it just feels very different than everything else on here. Now the remaining tracks in here, again, like I said, are all rehearsals, and they're definitely more rough. Like they're not very polished. They sound like they were just like, you know, recorded on a tape deck and just like they hit play and just played them out. But I mean, I imagine there was probably more to it considering this was just one person. But it's interesting to hear like the songs and the rehearsals are a little bit different in sections, so clearly there was some work done to them before they got to the demo stage. And they're also all instrumental, so it's kind of interesting just hearing the music itself without the long, cavernous vocals in there. And again, kind of like a compilation where you get to hear like songs that got worked on over time and changed. It's really interesting hearing the raw form. Granted, again, they don't sound as good as the demo, but, you know, musically, it's really interesting. This was really killer. Thank you, Brian. And yeah, if you get any copies of the first demo, I'd love to hear that one too. But yeah, if you love, again, Incantation, Hooded Menace, Carcinoid, Temple of Void, stuff like that, definitely check this out. I don't know if he's got a Bandcamp or anything. I'm going to find what I can find and put it in the video description so you guys can check this out. But yeah, this was really solid. Thank you again, man. Imperial Doom. This is their 2024 demo. I snagged this actually at, well, I don't know if it was their merch booth because they weren't a band that played there, but I believe the gentleman that plays guitar in this band, Daniel Paz, was running his own merch booth. I was just checking out stuff in there, and I believe was with actually one of my buddies, my good buddy from Australia. And we were going through like all the stuff there, and he pulled out a vinyl by this band. And I believe it was their full length, which I didn't get because they didn't have it on CD, but he was just checking out. I was like, dude, this band looks pretty damn awesome. And he like flipped it over and it was a picture of the band. I was like, man, these guys look like pretty badass. I was like, yeah, they do. Because the guy you're talking about is standing right there selling the merch. It was hot out. We drank a lot, so we were bound to make mistakes like that. But yeah, he didn't have the full length on CD, so he offered me this for like $5, and this is, I guess, all right, it's described as death doom, at least in the archives. I would say this is more straightforward, old school death metal, more mid-tempo, and in terms of like the doom vibe, I really didn't get a lot of it. This feels more anthemic. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call it like, I don't know, like Amon Amarth, because it's not that cheesy. I mean, I'd still like Amon Amarth, but I mean, let's admit it, they are cheesy. But it kind of has more of that vibe where it's more uplifting and empowering than, you know, down in the dumps doom. And all the songs on here definitely have more of that vibe. Like there's definitely some more sinister, dark moments, but for the most part, I get more of that maybe bolt thrower sort of like anthemic vibe where, you know, stride forward, roll over your enemies in a tank or something like that. I don't know if they do tanks, the conjure stuff, I guess. Lots of galloping drums, like more mid-tempo, chuggy riffs. Pretty solid stuff. Now, I did think it was interesting that this only lists 2 tracks in here, Echoes from the Abyss and Soulless Laments, but there's a 3rd track on here, and I'm not entirely sure what it is because I couldn't find any information on it. It could be a cover of another band. It could be another track in there that's just unlisted, that's just a bonus if you get the CD, but I'm really not sure. But I thought this was pretty solid. You know, very short listen. I think it runs maybe 10 minutes. But the songs, I think, were just good, straightforward, old school death metal. And honestly, I don't have a lot of, you know, metal from Colombia, so this was another country to kind of get some more stuff and kind of sample a little bit more of the whole South American scene down there. But yeah, pretty solid stuff. I definitely want to check out the full length. Hopefully they got a CD version and, I can, order it, or maybe I'll get lucky and find it in a record store, who knows. But yeah, check this band out. Pretty solid demo. Human Infection, Gravesite. This is the third album from this Virginia-based death grind act. So another interesting little happening. I forget which band we were watching at the power plant, but I got a tap on the shoulder, and I believe it was their vocalist, Andrew Brown, that just handed me the CD and said, hey, I really love the channel. Here you go. And I was like, hey, cool, thanks. I couldn't really hear much else because there was a band playing, but I got a CD of it, and I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Oh, it's on Horror, Pain, Gore, Death Productions. I like that label. Now, I'm not sure if this band actually played at MDF. Again, if they did, this was one of the bands that played at Angel's Rock Bar, which I only went to once just to see Poon Tickler for a bit. But either way, I thought it was cool that he saw us out in the crowd. He gave one to Jammin' John, too. And, man, this album absolutely rips. This is very old school death metal / death grind. Like, I get more death metal than I do death grind on here. Like, definitely a lot of old Cannibal Corpse and Suffocation, lots of chuggy riffs, lots of groove, and man, dude, like, this album is catchy and brutal. It really kind of like occupies so many different territories in 90s death metal that I love. Like, you get just like flat out, just awesome death metal, old school riffing. Again, early Cannibal Corpse, lots of like Floridian stuff, but also like some more like New York stuff, like namely Suffocation. You get those more brutal, just kind of heavy, almost slamish breakdowns. In Crypts of Holiness in particular, there is just a flat out disgusting, almost slam riff on that. But a lot of this just has just amazing, groovy, riffy pockets that, baseline, if you just like death metal in general, you can get into, like The Weavers of Lunacy, Wounds Devour You, Embrace Perfection. Like, all these songs, you can just kind of latch onto a groove and just kind of bang your head. But there's also like some technical flair to some of the riffs. Like, they're not just straight up meat and potatoes death metal. There's a lot of different facets to this band's sound. But I like the fact that almost all these elements kind of lurk in just like flat out old school 90s death metal. Like, I feel I've been listening to this album for years, like since I got into death metal when I was a teen. Like, that's the level of comfort and familiarity I feel like I have with this album already. Like, in The Dreaming Eye, you get like killer hammer-on melodies that are very Cannibal Corpse-esque. Enrapturing Divine has this absolutely sick descending triplet chug. Again, very much in the vein of Suffocation. Like, all this is very familiar territory, but it's executed so well. The songs are well paced. They don't run into one another. And there's 13 tracks on here, and honestly, most of them really stand out, mainly for the riff work. The vocals on here are really cool too, because they're decidedly clear. Again, a very 90s death metal approach. Like, they're not doing, like deep gutturals as much. They're just doing like a straightforward old school death metal roar. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Andrew, for spotting me in the crowd and giving me a copy. If you're a big fan of just like, again, 90s death metal, Florida, New York, hell, there's even like a little bit of like Broken Hope and Oppressor kind of stuff on here too. Check this out. This album absolutely rips. I definitely need to check out your other albums for damn sure, because yeah, I need more Human Infection in my life, which sounds messed up, but it totally doesn't if you're a death metal fan. So yeah, check it out. All right, we got a couple here by Believer. We have their debut album, Extraction from Mortality, and their third album, Dimensions, and they could not be any more different. Now, this is a technical / progressive thrash metal act from Pennsylvania. I have some of their later works, namely, was it Transhuman and Gabriel, and that was my introduction to them. They had like broken up for a long period of time and then come back, and I thought they were pretty decent, but I kept hearing that their earlier stuff was, definitely the stuff to check out. So I saw these at Soundgarden and I snagged them, and man, yeah, this is just some absolutely wild stuff. But that is more reserved for this one. This one is just a straight up thrashy barn burner of an album. While I would compare like Transhuman and Gabriel to like, more Anacrusis sort of like technical, progressive thrash, this is just flat out fast, aggressive, riffy, very much in the vein of bands like, Devastation, Corner. I would even say like just some flat out Slayer riffs on here too. Before I got into any of that, the opening of this album I thought was just very strange. Like, lots of new samples and, various layered noises and what sounds like a cat walking across a keyboard. It's a lot of just like weird atonal notes that don't necessarily make any sense. But that song, Unite, just explodes into just intense riffing, yelled vocals. The production on here is gritty, like it's just got a nasty old school kind of like, more late 80s, early 90s thrash tone, which this came out in 1989, so that totally makes sense. But the thing that kind of caught me off guard was I was expecting something a little bit more progressive like throughout, because again, my experience with this band is very limited to kind of their later material and the stuff that is a little bit more prog leaning. But this is just full tilt thrash with, really just intense technical riffing. And this band, I believe, is Christian, or at least at this point in their career, they define themselves as Christian metal. So I guess they're like the antithesis of atheist in a way. That isn't just because of the name, because, musically, I could definitely make a lot of comparisons in terms of like style-wise, even in their stylistic shifts as they went on, because this might run a little bit closer to like, Piece of Time than it does like any of the later atheist stuff. But this album is just packed with barn burner after barn burner, like Blemished Sacrifices, Vile Hypocrisy, Desolation of Sodom, or DOS. Blemished Sacrifices even has like blast beats on it, so there's a little bit of stuff that is, a little bit closer to like death thrash, or at least, again, like, the 90s thrash sound, which definitely got a lot more aggressive than, say, like the earlier 80s stuff. Now, I really wouldn't call this one like progressive as much as I would call it like a little bit more technical. Like, there's definitely some moments that, kind of get outside of the, more just straightforward thrash on here, like Tormented. Tormented has like some really interesting angular riffs on it, and the long string section that opens up the title track, it definitely sounds a little bit more progressive in terms of like the song building and such, but some of this is just a little odd, like the last track, Stress. It's just sort of this weird crossover song that just feels kind of just tacked on the end. Most of this is just straight up vicious thrash metal though, and I dig the hell out of this. Now this one could not be any more different. In fact, if it didn't say Believer on it, I would have thought it was a completely different band, because this is definitely their more progressive shift. The songs kind of defy the conventional song structure. Like there's a lot of just like weird breakdowns, polyrhythms, jazz fusion drums. Rhythmically, it is definitely way more complex, way more of the progressive flourishes all over, and there's even more of a shift towards, I guess you could say like progressive death metal, like in the vein of like later Death. In fact, the vocals almost sound very Chuck-ish, or, a little bit John Tardy-ish too. There's also way more attention paid to atmosphere and samples and just, like layered noises. It's a very jarring, strange listen from track to track, or even within the tracks. Like some of the transitions are very nutty, very like Cynic-esque, or, more like Unquestionable Presence atheist. Like the song Dementia, man, that is just sort of an odd song. Like it's mostly spoken word over acoustic melodies, and then it just takes a hard shift into like almost technical death metal / death thrash, or what is but cannot be. Man, like some of the lead work on there is just bizarre as hell. The songs overall on here just feel way more experimental, and I feel like they were, just trying a little bit too much at points. Like there are a lot of just bizarre vocal filters all over these tracks, and it feels like it's just constantly shifting. Like once you feel like you have a hold of this album, it kind of throws you off with like the next part coming. Now, I did enjoy most of this, but I have to say like the, long trilogy of Knowledge, which, makes up 4 tracks at the end and different movements. Well, I appreciate the musicality on it and the fact that, it's kind of symphonic, because there's strings, you have violins, I believe there's a cello on there. You also have operatic female vocals, like there's a woman essentially doing an aria, and then it's going back and forth between like the more harsh vocals that the band are doing. And it's ambitious. It's very wild in terms of the songwriting. Like honestly, it kind of reminded me a bit of Arcturus a bit, but it didn't necessarily gel for me, and it kind of just came across as like just a little bit too much. And I said it was a trilogy, but it is in 4 parts because there's an intro to the trilogy, which counts as, I guess, part of it, but they don't, whatever. It feels needless. Like, it's a lot of atmosphere, which, believe me, this album is teeming with atmosphere, and then it goes into the tracks. And again, like, technical, very impressive songwriting in terms of like taking a lot of chances, but to me, it comes across as like just a little too pretentious. And I like really weird techie music and all, but you know, the back half of this just kind of got a little bit weird. Like after Singularity, which was more of a callback to this stuff, it just kind of started getting a little bit too bonkers for its own good. But I imagine there's like a lot of like high concept in here versus this one. And I don't know, this definitely appeals more to just, you know, the kind of stuff that I like. Like, again, like this more like coroner devastation style, like death thrash on here, or just like hyper aggressive thrash appeals to me more than just the more avant-garde-ish stuff in here. But either way, I recommend checking out both. There's an album in between that I'm clearly missing, and who knows, that might be a really interesting transitional album. I still need to check it out. But I dig both of these for different reasons, probably leaning more on this one, as you can tell, but this has still got a lot of really cool stuff in it. If you're a giant prog fan, you like, you know, genre-bending music in general, this one, Dimensions for sure. But if you just want some gritty but technical, vicious thrash metal, check this one out too. Both of them are good in their own right. Just check out Believer. I'm going to find that middle album eventually, and I think that'll pretty much be it, because I don't think they've put out much here recently. Either way, check them out. Good stuff. Black Tusk, The Way Forward. This is the 6th album from this Georgia-based sludge metal act. Actually, it's been 6 years, I believe, since TCBT, which was their, I guess you could say, comeback album. They, you know, decided to continue on as a band after the tragic death of their bassist in a motorcycle accident. And this is one I wanted to cover in a review, but we just didn't have time. And this is, I don't know, like a little bit different for them. Like, baseline, I think this is probably one of their catchiest albums yet. This band's style of sludge metal, I've always thought was interesting because I think it does stand out, at least in sludge metal, as it leans heavily on punk and hardcore. And generally when you think of sludge metal, you think of like slower music. And for the most part, that is true. But this band plays a lot of like up-tempo stuff. Like there's a lot of D-beat driven, kind of crust punk, sort of like infused, just viciousness. It's that element I think that has always made them stand out a bit. But when it came down to like gelling in terms of like more melody, you know, it's something that I really didn't hear a lot from the band. Like every now and then you get like a more catchy, you know, like kind of hooky track, but a lot of this was just very raucous and explosive. But this one, I think they finally found the balance between the two, because this is just catchy riff after catchy riff, but it doesn't sacrifice 1 ounce of the heaviness. Stuff like Harness the Alchemist has like this really good, catchy, groovy build-up before getting into the inevitable D-beats, because D-beats are all over here. But it's how they're building into songs. And again, despite being very crusty and filthy sounding, there's just good melodic hooks on here. Breath of Life has this really cool synth lead on it, which I was totally not expecting. And Ocean of Obsidian, I mean, it kind of sounds like High on Fire, which, I mean, I think parts of this band have always been kind of comparable to High on Fire, because High on Fire generally likes to go fast for their style. Like, again, stoner metal is not a genre where you think, oh man, this is going to be fast and up-tempo as hell. Nah, man, you're going to hang on to some grooves and get droned to death, which is totally what I sign up for anytime I pick up a stoner metal album. But I like the fact that High on Fire kind of breaks out of that. And this band kind of does that with sludge metal, and again, kind of does it in their own way. The songs in here are still kind of short, kind of straightforward. That's kind of always been their thing, but I feel like there's just a little bit more to them in the way of dynamics and hooks, and even variety. Like, you don't get a lot of songs that kind of just feel the same because the melodies or the riffs break them up. I mean, hell, Dance in Your Grave might be like the heaviest track on here, and it still has like some good, solid melodic hooks to it, but it also has like just the biggest, crunchiest riffs on it. This, honestly could go down as one of my favorites from this band, just because there are, again, like some different elements and they're employed really well. In fact, these might be like some of the catchiest songs that this band has written yet. It's been a while since I've gone back and listened to TCBT. I was kind of, wishy-washy on that one, just because, it was kind of a tough comeback album, and I felt like that one was almost more of a punk album than it was a sludge metal album. This one, it's got more of a balance on it, and again, new elements. If you're a big fan of, like High on Fire's kind of close, but also like just straight up like crust stuff, like Dysphere too. It's a lot of that on here. Check this out. Great listen. And I think, again, this honestly might be one of the best things they've put out yet. So yeah, check it out. Come to Grief, Killed by Life. This is a compilation that came out last year on translation loss from this New Hampshire sludge metal act. I thought I missed an entire full length, but when I looked this up, I was like, oh, this is stuff from splits and singles that they decided to put out on CD. And, well, it says Come to Grief on it, so yeah, of course I was going to get it because I love that last album. Now, the first 4 tracks on here are from the Worst of Times EP. I forget when that one came out, but all the stuff was stuff that I had not heard from this band. And, man, those are possibly some of the most vicious songs on the album, but, it's kind of hard to say because all these songs are droning, heavy, shrieked, distorted vocals, slow. If you know anything about Grief, the band that this band is essentially a spiritual successor to, then you kind of know what this band's about. The songs are just dense, the riffs are ungodly heavy. Futility of Humanity has like kind of a live start to it, even though it's the 3rd track in here, which I don't know, I feel like if you opened with that kind of gives it more of the live show vibe. Junk Love, which, that's a very Buzz Oven-esque, song title there. Kind of has like a NOLA swing to it. This band is, from north of the Mason-Dixon line, but there's still a lot of that like southern sludge love that comes out in their stuff. Take Me in My Sleep, which, these song titles just reek of optimism. That one came from a split they did with Fistula, and yeah, that song, very Sabbathy, kind of blurs the boundaries between sludge and doom metal up until the vocals come in, and again, that shrieked sort of tone that the vocals have, that's almost more purely a sludge metal thing for sure. And then the last 3 tracks in here from the Pray for the End EP, which again, I had never heard, but man, that stuff is super dark. The last track, I probably shouldn't say this word just because YouTube watches. Our Wording the Willing, let you fill in the blank there, has some of the most disgusting, bending, sliding, just ugly riffs on it. Like one of the most disgusting songs on the album. But all of this is just flat out filthy. Like if you are a big sludge fan, this is definitely going to appeal to you in some way. And I like the fact that as a compilation, this feels very uniformly mixed. The production from song to song, or at least from like EP to EP to the little split song on there, it doesn't feel like they changed around too much. I don't know if this was like, remixed and remastered all for this. I kind of doubt it because that seems like just a lot of extra work to put out a compilation. But either way, all of this is just flat out filthy sludge metal, lots of syncopated, slow, just disgusting riffs, and again, shrieked vocals. It's flat out awesome. If you love Grief and if you love Come to Grief's full length, I totally recommend this. It's probably a good way to get all their other stuff because I don't know if those other releases came out on CD. In fact, I know at least one of them only came out on vinyl. But this will cover, I think, pretty much everything they have released to date. So yeah, check this out. Again, if you're a big fan of like Buzz Oven and 7 Foot Spleen, if anyone remembers that band too, check this out. Killer. Deadhead, The Feast Begins at Dawn. This is the 1991 debut album from this Dutch death thrash act. This is the 2019 remaster and reissue on Hammerheart Records, which, man, is that label excellent at doing that stuff. After going over the Shadow Soul EP, I decided it was time to actually get some more stuff, and I forget which vendor in the Mall O Metal that I saw this in, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, dude, that. Pretty much everyone in that review recommended getting their debut album because it is flat out vicious, and man, are they right. After the intro on here, Untergang des Abelandes, maybe, Saved by Science. That song is just a blitz of insane riffs, blast beats, shreddy leads. This band goes full tilt boogie right from the rip, and they pace this album as just frantic as hell. When this band decides to go fast, it's like South American thrash metal fast. And South American thrash moves like its foot is glued to the gas pedal. The drum work on here is absolutely bonkers. It sounds like the dude is about to lose his mind or lose his life going at the pace he's going at. And the maniacal vocals give this sort of a weird, sinister vibe, but man, the thrashy aggression on the riff work on here. Like when they're flying, it's awesome just to hear them go, you know, just Mach 10. But when they slow down and get like some solid grooves, man, this is just flat out catchy as hell. Desolated by the Shining, In Your Room, and The Festering in particular are huge standouts on here. Dude, the riffs on those songs just absolutely sing, like, you know, bringing back like the early stuff from Sepultura, like maybe all the way through Beneath the Remains too, but also, you know, almost bordering on that, you know, like kind of thrashy death metal sound of like early Pestilence as well. I would even say there's stuff on here that kind of sounds like Morbid Saint, early Creator, even Possessed. Some of the tracks are a little odd just because, well, I mean, one of them is Below the Earth, which is a very short transitional track going into Slayer Kind. Honestly, I don't know why they're separate tracks because one seems to lead in the other pretty damn well, and I think Below the Earth is like only like a minute and a half long, so it's kind of an interesting transitional track. But the Tribulation is kind of the odd one. It's mostly an acoustic melody. It's very sinister and very dark, but the fact that there are like looped growls and grunts and screams in the background of it, it's the only thing on the album itself that I think is a little bit extra, which is weird because this includes a lot of demos and stuff from EPs, and even some stuff from compilations too. None of that stuff feels extra compared to that track, The Tribulation, which is just sort of odd. And I gotta give a lot of credit to Hammerheart, whoever they got to remaster, remix, or just remaster this stuff. Everything on here sounds great. Like even the demos, the early EPs, the compilation tracks, everything on here sounds fantastic. And yeah, I need to get some more Deadhead. This is an absolutely banging debut. I know this band has quite a lot of material, so I definitely have a lot of stuff to hunt down. Hopefully Hammerheart has those covered as far as remasters and reissues and whatnot. But yeah, if you're a fan of just frantically paced, hyper-aggressive thrash metal / death thrash, Possessed, early Creator, Morbid Saint for damn sure. Check this out. This is an absolutely vicious listen from start to finish, and I have to say even a lot of the extras on here are absolutely badass too. So yeah, great stuff. Night. Darkness, Silence, Mirror, Flame. This is the first album from this San Francisco-based blackened heavy metal act, I guess you could say. I am a huge fan of their second album, Voices from the Cronium Moon. It was one of my year-enders in 2021, 2022, one of the two. In terms of like all the retro heavy metal that has come out, that album is one of my favorites, not only because it kind of embraces, again, like a little bit more black metal, especially in the tone and the whole vibe of it, and of course the vocals, but also in terms of like the things that I love about classic heavy metal, like namely riffs and guitar harmonies, that band just kind of does everything right. I love their songwriting. It's very hooky, it's very anthemic, but it's also very dark and sinister. And believe it or not, I totally forgot they had another album. This one came out in 2020 on a smaller record label that I didn't know. This is the 2023 reissue on Season of Mist, and this is almost as good as Voices of the Cronium Moon. There are a couple of key differences overall. First off, the songs in here are much longer. Voice of the Cronium Moon, I want to say, is just like a scratch above a half an hour. But this album, I'd say, is probably close to the 40-minute mark, if not a little bit over that. And the songs are just a little bit more lavish. They draw out the verses. There's more going on the bridge occasionally, but stylistically very much the same as the second album. A lot of like classic Iron Maiden, I would say even like, you know, Scorpions, like a lot of their earlier stuff in there. Songs like Night Terrors, I mean, kind of encapsulates the sound. It's bright, it's a rockin' anthem, but it's also, you know, very evil and kind of doomy sounding. And then Bright, I guess you could say is like a power ballad, though I don't know if you can have a power ballad with the vocals that are on here, which the vocals on Voice of the Croying Moon, I think I made a comparison to it sounding like the ghost of Lemmy speaking through an air conditioning vent, and I still think that's pretty accurate. They're a little bit different on here. They still sound gravelly and very throaty, you know, not quite as distorted as they are on the second album, but they still have like the effect of like Satan speaking to you through a walkie-talkie. But I feel like the level of distortion is a little bit different on here, and there's a little bit more vocal inflection. Voices of the Croying Moon, I feel like it's almost a spoken word performance, like there's not a lot of inflection or necessarily like, you know, a note carried for a very long period of time or anything like that, even if it is just a growl. Here, there's like a little bit more like intensity at certain spots. Sometimes it's a little bit more withdrawn. And those main things, plus the fact that I think this album is maybe a little bit more up-tempo, like, you know, Voice of the Croying Moon definitely has like more mid-tempo rockers on here. There's a lot more galloping Iron Maiden charging into battle sort of vibes on here. And I like that both albums are a little bit different. I do like that Voices of the Croying Moon is a little bit more streamlined, like it is down to its bare elements, and the bare elements on that album are absolutely fantastic. I love every track on it. This one, I kind of like that it's a little bit more drawn out. I still would probably take, you know, Voice of the Croying Moon over this one by a hair, but both are absolutely excellent. So yeah, this band is 2 for 2 with just quality releases here. Pretty much if you love stuff like, I mean, again, like classic new album stuff, because I feel like that's kind of the root of it. Also a lot of like early Judas Priest, like Sad Wings of Destiny, Stained Class, stuff like that. But I suppose you could also compare it to like, you know, Midnight a little bit, albeit like less Venom worship, like Midnight if they wanted to do something decidedly more melodic but still also sound gritty as hell. Check this out. Check out Voices of the Croying Moon for damn sure if you haven't checked out that album. Honestly, again, one of my favorites from whatever year it came out. It's kind of hard to keep track, but either way, check this out. Absolutely awesome album. All right, we got another pair here, and they're also Christian, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, we have a pair from Exol here. We have their debut full-length Burial and their second album Undeceived. And honestly, I've been following this band since 2003's Synergy. I've been a huge fan just in terms of like their amazing songwriting. I followed a fair amount of their side projects as well. While Synergy was the first album I ever got by them, I've been following them on Solid State Records samplers for a while, and it was songs off of Undeceived that I heard first, and I was like, dude, this band sounds absolutely amazing. Baseline, I guess you could say it's progressive death metal. I mean, death metal seems like the right tag, like maybe melodic death metal. There's a lot of stuff on here that reminds me of like early Opeth, but kind of mixed with like later death, I guess. There's even elements of black metal in there too, I would say, that, you know, kind of give it a more sinister edge despite being very holy. Burial, I would say, is like maybe a little bit heavier overall, just in terms of the tone of the album. They both definitely have like big early Opeth vibes, but this one definitely brings in a lot more like angular, twisted, technical death metal riffing in there. It has an overall more heavy approach, despite working in like, you know, interesting like melodeath, sort of like folky melodies here and there. But the songs in here are just intricate and vicious. Right out of the gate, I would say this band was more like focused on writing very intricate, lavish songs with lots of movements and transitions. And yeah, like almost every song on here has, you know, like breaks where they go into clean melodies and even clean vocal sections, which honestly, they kind of have like, I don't know, a bit of a classic prog metal sort of vibe to them, like, I don't know, like power prog maybe, because they are very high register, but they're very well sung and they play off of the harsher vocals really well. I would say you can kind of compare them a little bit to like early James LaBrie, like back when I think he was a much better singer, and I'll leave it at that. Great use of dissonant melodies in there too, to kind of add, again, another layer of, more dark atmosphere. And, for being a very, Christian band, because all their lyrics are very, very centered on, Christianity, and they're not necessarily as preachy, but the tone of the album is very dark. I feel like there's only brief moments of bright melodies that pop up on here, just kind of let the sun peer in before getting right back down to the dark, nasty riffs. And that is pretty much the same deal on here, except I think this one definitely incorporates more melody, and the songs aren't as experimental, but they still are definitely very progressive. But I would say baseline, they're better at being catchier in here. Ember might have been the first song I ever heard by this band, and that stomping riff instantly caught my ear. But it's the next part that really caught my ear, because I was expecting, again, like flat out death metal vocals for it to get even heavier, and then it drops out into clean passages, really haunting guitar melodies, and absolutely beautiful sung vocals. The transitions of that song, I think, are absolutely amazing, and it gives it this great peaks and valleys sort of vibe. And a lot of this album, I just feel like, was focused more on just straight up catchy riffs, but organizing them in, like songs that are definitely more progressive in nature. And that makes the songs on here a little bit more memorable. Not as though they're not good on here, but the songs in here stick in my brain a little bit more, like of Light and Shade and I Watch. Again, giant catchy riffs and tons of dynamic shifts in them, but they never lose that sense of melody. It doesn't get too progressive or too technical. It's just awesome songwriting. Now, one complaint I do have about both of these, and it might just come down to like the remaster or just reissue. Where's the bass? The bass is almost non-existent on both of these, but this is probably the guiltiest culprit, because despite, a constant barrage of double bass kicks, you can barely hear it on here. The low end feels completely stripped out of this, and pretty much on this one too, which was an issue I had with the originals. The songs that popped up on those solid state compilations when I would play them in my car were like, dude, like this has like absolutely no low end. And I don't know if these were remastered and then reissued, but I feel like if you remastered them, you'd probably say, hey, we should probably bring the bass up, because it is just not there. In fact, I feel like they should have put a warning on this saying bass not included. That's the only issue I really have with these though. Like the songwriting on both of these, it's incredible. This band is absolutely awesome. Honestly, I like all of their albums, and now with these two, I do own all their albums, so this was kind of a completionist quest here. But yeah, I need some bass. That would be nice. Either way though, I recommend this, especially again if you're a fan of again, like Opeth. I could definitely hear like a bit of Cynic at times on here, and maybe even a little bit of like Edge of Sanity too. Just check this band out. These two albums are both fantastic, and then just check out the rest of their stuff, because it's also pretty awesome. And I believe the band reunited, so who knows, maybe we'll get some new stuff in the future. But yeah, just flat out killer stuff right here. All right, we got a pair here from Rune Magic. We have their most recent album, Beyond the Cenotaph of Mankind, and a kind of bonus EP they put out last year, Last Skull of Humanity. I've been getting pretty heavy into this band here recently. I feel like this is one that I ignored for too long, for as long as I've been into Death Doom. It might have been the name. I probably thought they were some like Gandalf worshipping power metal band. I was like, no. But I've been sagging their albums here lately, and man, Darkness Death Doom especially, God, absolutely killer. I got a Rune Magic shirt in the Metalhead box not too long ago. So yeah, clearly the signs are pointing me towards getting more Rune Magic, and both of these are pretty awesome, and they're both really different. This new one, I would say, is pretty much a day at the office for these guys. It's melodic, but it's just heavy, lumbering, lots of sinister melodies, and haunting, dark vocals. The opening track, Archaic Magic After the Red Sun, it seems like every melody that comes after the already epic, sinister melody that preceded it is even more epic and sinister. And as it goes on, this album definitely kind of pulls from some different camps. Endless Night and Eternal End has some cool Middle Eastern tinges to it. So like a doomy night in the desert. I really dig this one. I mean, this is kind of just what they do. I will say it doesn't have the giant suffocating vibe of, well, like Darkness, Death, Doom. That's kind of, you know, my apex one at this point. Or at least in terms of the ones I've listened to. Like, there's a lot of stuff in their discography I haven't checked out. Like, this is their 13th album, and I own 4 of their full lengths, counting this one. But this doesn't necessarily feel as oppressive as a lot of their earlier stuff. In fact, I would say the guitar tone is a little bit more withdrawn in comparison to the earlier stuff. Like, it just doesn't have that huge droning sound that the earlier albums have, but I think all the songs in here are quality, they're dynamic, they're not just kind of like plodding along like Funeral Doom or anything like that. There's a lot more, you know, intricacies to it, tempo shifts and riff changes. The Storm Road Beyond the Firmament is probably one of my big standouts. It just feels murkier and sludgier than other tracks, and I love what I think is a slide guitar lead on it. Like, it just gives it this kind of weird, kind of elastic effect. It just feels a little bit more creepy, just the way that lead is played. Nocturnal Deities of Winter has some more up-tempo moments on it. Revocation of Spectral Paths is a little bit more atmospheric. Like, it's, I don't know, just kind of just a sinister, creepy kind of extra track, because it is listed as a bonus track, but it's weird that it's the 3rd track in. Generally, you see all the bonus tracks come at the end. The end of that song in particular kind of just drones on this whole atmospheric section, and admittedly, it kind of takes a little too long to get to the end of it. Like, there's only so much atmosphere I really need to know that I'm supposed to feel unsettled and creeped out by the music. But if you want them at their doomiest, it's the title track in here. Like, it's borderline Funeral Doom. It is just dragging itself through the mud and murk, and yeah, just an absolute solid way to close this album. Now, this one's kind of interesting because it is essentially the raw demos from songs that ended up on Enter the Realm of Death, which is their 2nd album, which I have not checked out yet. These are pre-production, rough mixes, and I kind of feel like I should have listened to Enter the Realm of Death just to get like more of a comparison, but I didn't. It kind of just slipped my mind, but these are really solid. The production, for what it is, sounds really good. Like, they are definitely stripped down. It's not as full and just huge sounding as this one, but hearing this very raw pre-production, it sounds like these are just flat out jams in the studio. It's a more gritty, raw overall sound too. Definitely, again, more of a callback to their earlier sound where it was less about melody. Like, I'm not saying like they're a super melodic band, but the more recent stuff, at least with this one, it definitely has more of a melodic tinge than, say, some of their earlier stuff. Longing for Hades was probably my big standout on this one. I think the riffs on that are just awesome. They're sinister and creepy. There's some really good harmonized melodies on it. And there's even like some just crusty D beats in there too that kind of like pick it up a bit. But I also really like the title track because it's just flat out doomy and bleak and ominous and yeah, just all the good things. I will say with the pre-production, I am missing a lot of that punch in the guitars. But again, that's just more of a reason for me to go check out the 2nd album. So I'm on the hunt for more Rune Magic because, yeah, all this stuff sounds really good. I like this one too. Again, a little bit more melodic, but I don't have that much of an issue with that. It's just that I came into this band with their more just flat out oppressive dark sound, and that's the sound I'm kind of just after in general with this band. But yeah, check both of these out. This is a solid full length. Once again, I haven't heard anything that's flat out bad from this band yet, but then again, there's like a lot of stuff that I have to check out by them. And this, I'd say it's like kind of like a for the fans only kind of thing, but it's still worth checking out, maybe picking it up. If you're a big fan of the 2nd album, you just want to hear like, again, the more raw version of at least some of the songs in there, check this out as well. Either way, Rune Magic is pretty damn awesome, and I definitely plan on getting more of their stuff in the future, so check these out. Upon Stone, Dead Mother Moon. This is the debut full length from this LA-based melodic death metal act. Here lately, there's been a really cool trend of bands going back and doing old school melodic death metal, like very early Gothenburg, like you know, Jester Race, the Gallery, you know, Slaughter the Soul, even before Slaughter the Soul stuff. And at one point in my life, I was so absolutely hooked on that sound. And hearing it done well again, and done in the way that I prefer it, with no clean vocals and letting the music itself kind of be the melodic aspect. I've been a huge fan of that. Like Majesty's album last year I thought was fantastic. But this really plays on like everything I love. Not only do I get like really cool guitar harmonies that kind of have that, again, classic In Flames sound, but this one is even riffier, and it is flat out heavy. The production here sounds like it was plucked right out of like 1993, albeit like mixed heavier and more dense. And I would say the guitar tone is almost kind of closer to like Swedish death metal, like the Stockholm sound. Like it's got a little bit of an HM2 buzzsaw chunk to it, but this balances out melody and ferocity so well. You still get blast beats, the songs are fast and thrashy. There's a lot of stuff in here that reminds me of Hypocrisy in particular, but the vocals kind of stay on that mid-range in terms of the growls, and again, tons of these just classic guitar harmonies everywhere, giving every song a little bit of a melodic tinge to it, but wisely not making all the guitar harmonies like such a big thing on every track to the point where they kind of overtake the riffs. That might have been like my only complaint on Majesty, is where I think they kind of overdid the harmonies a little bit. Not that they were bad, I think that album is awesome. It's just, give me some riffs. Like, that's one of the things that I absolutely loved about Melodeath was, yes, it's melodic, but there's also tons of heavy riffs, and this band just brings it on that. Heavy grooves, lots of double bass play, and again, it stays away from clean vocals, which it's kind of a hit or miss thing with me in terms of Melodeath. Another awesome thing that I found out when I picked this up was the fact that Brian Fair of Shadows Fall is on here on the song Paradise Failed, and he contributes some cool backup growls. And honestly, I was just stoked to hear him back because, all right, like literally everything on here reminds me of like early 2000s melodic death metal, and to a degree, the whole like metalcore scene that popped up around that time, because a lot of those metalcore bands just aped the living fuck out of In Flames and Soilwork and At the Gates and whoever else they could find that was from Gothenburg. But Shadows Fall were in that mix too, and I just love their blend of like metalcore and thrash metal riffs. Like that band was just absolutely fantastic, and it's awesome to hear them back again. But Brian's vocal contributions were really cool in here. This whole album is kind of short, like it runs just a little bit over a half an hour, but honestly every track on here is killer. Even the bonus track Dig Up Her Bones, which is a Michael Graves era Misfit song, which honestly I really haven't heard much of the Michael Graves era. I kind of just stick with the early Danzig stuff, but they do a solid job on there. It seems like a fun, kind of upbeat, albeit creepy song. But yeah, it's just kind of Misfits anyway. But yeah, this whole album absolutely rips. Onyx Through the Heart might be one of my favorites on here. I don't know, the title track, the opening track, absolutely whoops ass. Yeah, this whole thing sounds great. It sounds raw. If I had heard this in 2002, like hypothetically if it came out in 2002 and not 2024, I would have been absolutely in love with it. I probably would have even like shelved In Flames for a little bit just to listen to this on repeat. It's that damn good. So yeah, if you're a big fan again of At the Gates, early In Flames, Hypocrisy, both kind of like some of the earlier stuff too, like the first two albums and the more Melodeath stuff, check this out. This album's fantastic from start to finish. And finally, we have a tape. And you know, this is weird. I don't think I've held up very many tapes up here unless I got them in a metalhead box or something. But we have an album here from Goetia. This is a DC-based death grind act. They actually played at MDF. Again, another one that played at Angel's Rock Bar that I didn't get a chance to see. But while I was resting my feet at the fountain over by the power plants, in between bands and such, the band's drummer Aiden came up to me, recognized me from the channel, and he said, "Hey, wait here. I can get you something to cover on your channel." And I was kind of hoping for a CD, but apparently they were all out of CDs. But he gave me a tape, and I appreciate that, even though like this is not my media. Which is weird because I'm an old dude holding up dated media, and that's kind of just what I do anyway, but just not this dated media. Like this is too dated for my old ass, I guess. I don't even own a tape player, but luckily I was able to stream this. And holy shit, this band is awesome. This is flat out gnarly death grind in the vein of Exhumed and Impaled. It is fast paced, aggressive as hell, blasts, grooves. This whole album is a flat out ripper. Lots of D beats. Every song in here is explosive as hell. Like, it gets right down the riffs, the maniacal vocals being shrieked in your face. Even the vocals very much in the vein of Exhumed and Impaled. But this band isn't without groove. Like the song Kokuri, Kokkuri, don't know that word. Good groovy start to that. Slowly kind of ramps up in energy as the song goes on. So this band knows when to like let off the brakes to kind of let the songs breathe a little bit. And the last track in particular, Christ Shadow, that one I thought was going to be an instrumental. Like the first 3.5 minutes of that 6-minute song are an instrumental lead-in. And it's got some of the most sinister melodies on it too. Like this one doesn't sound like flat out like grindcore aggressive. It starts off slow and brooding. It sounds evil as hell. And then it eventually takes off into blasts and D beats. And it's just a vicious song from start to finish. But yeah, this whole EP is absolutely awesome. It's so awesome, in fact, that I was going to order it from them on CD on their Bandcamp, but they are out of CDs at the moment. So hopefully they get around to doing some more CDs, because I would love to own this and whatever future stuff they do, because I'm a fan, guys. This has got tons of like thrashy, grindy energy all throughout it. Great riffs. It's just a beast of a listen. If, again, you are a big fan of Exhumed and Impaled, I strongly recommend checking this out. I really wish I had more to say about it, but it is kind of a short offering. But yeah, just jam this thing. It will take up maybe 20 minutes of your life, and if you're a death grind fan, it should be an absolutely awesome 20 minutes. So check it out. And all right, that knocks it out for my Maryland Deathfest haul, which, I mean, in comparison, I feel like this is kind of a smaller pile, because if I was left to my own devices a little bit more and I wasn't so dead set on seeing as many of the awesome bands that were on there as possible, I probably could have shopped till I dropped, but I also wasn't like lugging around a backpack or anything like that, and I decided to not do that to John this time, because last time he hauled all my stuff and his. Like, he was like my pack camel for the entire journey in 2022. Made him stronger though, reasonably sure. Made him complain a little bit more too, but you know, it did make him stronger, I think. But yeah, the next collection updates you should see from me are going to be from the Florida haul. So yeah, by the time you see this, I should be already working on those, so look forward to those in the future. And well, of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old t-shirts are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for all your support. It's been amazing doing this. I know, the thank you part of the video, it's weird, it's awkward, but I have to do it because I mean it. Every time I do one of these and see you guys comment and, you know, talk in the live chat and all that stuff, or even like share the videos, it means so much to us here. It's been, again, one of the coolest things I think I've done in my life, which does kind of sound lame in a way, but it also kind of sounds cool, I think. I don't know. I love doing this, and you guys make it so much more enjoyable, and we have tons of stuff on the horizon for you. We should be getting together for the Meshuggah ranking here relatively soon. I believe we have the 13th penciled in as a recording date. Hopefully all things go smoothly there so we can get that done. Because at the end of that video, we're going to have a fun selection process for what we're doing next in terms of ranking. So stay tuned to the end of that video. But yeah, you guys flat out rule. Thank you once again, and we will catch you later.